Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Ireland once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. So the last beer that I had from these guys was very nice. It was a little bit of a more unusual sub-style, I guess we could say though. And the one that we're going to try today is something a little bit more conventional, so I have to say I'm quite curious to see how it turns out, because this brewery is very highly rated in fact. And it's always nice to review some Irish beers here on Rampant Lion Reviews as well. So for this one then, we are going to go to Northern Ireland, County Down in the southeast of the country, and to a little place called Kilkeel to be specific. And that means that we're going to have a look at my second beer from Hut Brewing Company. So this one comes from their Solo Series. It is the Solo Series Strata, coming in at 6% ABV. It's an IPA. Exactly what kind of IPA it is, I guess we're going to find out when we taste it. But yeah, the Solo Series, as you might guess, is their single hopped IPA series. And there's been a few beers released from this before, but this is the one that I was able to get a hold of. So looking forward to it, as I said earlier. A few shout outs in this video then, since it's another Irish review. First and foremost to Paul Rogers of Dalriada Imports. It's thanks to him that you guys are getting to enjoy a little bit of an Irish mini-series over the next little while. So he imports all of these wonderful Irish beers over here to Scotland, and he's supplied me with a good number of things to review for you over the next little while. And he's looking to expand his import business over the next little while too. So you might find these Irish beers down in England at some point soon. So keep your eyes open, because there's some really good Irish stuff out there these days. Big shout out as well to Brendan Sewell of Views on Brews, and also Thomas McCarthy of Window Beer, two very good Irish beer tubers, and they are doing Irish beer a lot more regular than I can. So check them out if you are interested in seeing Irish beer reviews a little bit more regularly. But yeah, let's crack on with this review then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hut Brewing, and you will see another one added on to that at some point in the very near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Irish beers that I've reviewed for you, both from the North and from the Republic, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, quite regularly at the moment. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Hut Brewing once again. So, Hut Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Kilkeel in County Down in the very southeastern corner of Northern Ireland. But the brewery was founded in January of 2017 by Andy McBride and his brother-in-law Neil Chambers. So both of these guys come from a background as tradesmen, and they say that this helped them in the early years with getting the brewery established. But Andy says he remembers trying some really bitter and also big malty beers, and this really got the pair of them into tasting beer, and it led them to brewing for themselves and researching ingredients along the way. So these guys were beer tasters, then home brewers, and then they turned professional. But Andy is the head brewer, and he's largely self-taught. He had planned to do the International Brewing Diploma, the IBD, but he couldn't find time between his construction career, having a young family, and actually starting the brewery simultaneously. So he just never ended up doing that. But Neil involves himself mostly with the business side of the brewery and does various other things around the company as well. So both are very actively involved on a day-to-day basis. But they started off the business with a 50-litre brew kit and a hut, which was at the side of Andy's house, hence the name Beer Hut. But their first commercial beers were actually brewed on this kit, and they just kind of spread like wildfire from then. But later on they upgraded to a 300-litre kit, and these days they're running a 10 hectolitre brew kit, and they've invested quite heavily in the brewery infrastructure over the last few years, and they've also begun exporting their beers to a few countries in Europe as well. But they also run a tap room at the brewery once a month, which was apparently quite a hurdle due to the difficult licensing laws in Northern Ireland, which I have heard a little bit about. And as of November 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 75 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they are a very highly rated brewery. in Northern Ireland these days, as I've said. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Beer Hut Brewing for the moment. The last beer, as I said, that we had from these guys, which was one of the Cornets, that was very nice. A big double milkshake IPA. Was it Galaxy and Citra Cornet, if I remember rightly? But that was a really kind of interesting double, yeah, you know, kind of milkshakey double IPA that, but this one should be a little bit more kind of conventional. I guess we'll need to try something from the dark end of the spectrum from these guys at some stage as well. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can tell you about them for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all those different beers that they've done. But let's crack on and see how we get on with this beer itself. So, as you can see, the artwork on this one is a little bit different to what we saw from Beer Hut last time, and this series is, you know, it does have its own artwork that you'll see repeated, just different colours for different hops basically. But there you can see Beer Hut Brewing Company at the top, the Solo Series Strata, India Pale Ale, then of course you've got another few little bits and bobs underneath, but nothing on the back of the can. Plain silver top. Of course, this is a 440ml can, and unfortunately with this one, because Paul gave me the beer, I really have no idea what you would actually pay for this in Ireland. I'll try and look up some Irish beer prices, or talk to Thomas or Brendan about that, and just see kind of roughly what you would pay for this kind of beer actually. But yeah, again, big thank you to Paul for giving this one to me to review. It's really cool to review Irish beers for you on the channel, because as I told you in some of my earlier videos, Irish beer for a long time was like gold dust, to be honest with you, in other countries. But yeah, 6% IPA, this one hot with Strata. A little bit about Strata as well. I brought my notes out on Strata once again. So this is an American hop. It's derived from the open pollination of German Pearl at Oregon State University, and it was originally known as X331 when it was still an experimental hop. But it can give between 11 and 18% alpha acid, and it should give you aromas and flavours of grapefruit, passion fruit and strawberry, along with a very strong dankness. I have had this hop in the past, and I remember really getting quite a little bit of strawberry out of it, so I'm curious to see whether that shows up in this one. So yeah, looking forward to it. It does also say that it only has barley malt in it, this one, so maybe this is going to be a little bit more of a kind of West Coasty type IPA rather than a New England one, which is kind of exciting in itself. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So the Beer Hut Solo Series Strata, 6% IPA from Kilkeel, County Down, Northern Ireland. Let's do this. We are. Let's get this guy out and into the glass. There we go. The can was pretty, pretty, how do you say, tight there? I don't know. The can was pretty solid, I have to say. So obviously the carbonation has been a little bit active in this one, but we'll put as much of it in as we can. I think for the moment, I think that will do. There's still maybe about 20% of the beer left in the can, something like that. But we've got enough to have a look at the appearance and the aroma and stuff like that. So yeah, quite a bit ahead on this one, I have to say. So before it disappears, you can see there is a bit of two-finger frothy. I would say it's very slightly creamy head on this one. You guys can have a little look at yourself, but I think it's going to show up as white on the camera there. But yeah, nice kind of frothy white head on this beer. It looks very, very good. But in terms of colour, this beer, it is definitely a very, very kind of bright yellow. If I put my hands behind the glass there, you can see the true colour of this beer. But yeah, lovely kind of very bright yellow colour, this one. And it does have a wee bit more of that kind of naturally hazy sort of thing to it that you would expect of a more West Coasty type pale ale rather than the kind of full-on haze that you'd expect of in New England. But it's not far away, to be quite honest with you. But remember, the colour of these beers depends on, one, the type of malts that you use. This determines the magnitude of the colour of the beer, of course, and the majority of the EBC rating. But the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any adjuncts that you put in and any barley aging that you do can also affect that as well. But yeah, I think that's everything that we really need to say about the colour of the beer. A lovely kind of bright yellow mango juice type colour. The level of haziness in this one, I think, is just due to the fact that it's most likely unfiltered and things, but yeah, it does have a lovely little bit of natural haze to it. Don't think we need to say anything more about that. You would if it was a New England IPA, right enough, but this one is a more West Coasty type one, but simply for the fact that it's only got barley malt in it. But it certainly looks the part. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. But other than that, nothing that we really need to say more about the, nothing more we need to say about the appearance for this one. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we go. You can see the head has just calmed down a little bit, but aroma time. Ooh, that does smell pretty nice actually. So, yeah, I'm going to say straight away, this one comes across as a really nice bready, straight up barley malt kind of. It comes across like just like a kind of, it's almost like some of the session IPAs that I've come across, to be honest with you. I always find that some of the session IPAs are quite bready leaning, but they also just have a little bit of bite and zip to them, and you kind of get that vibe from the malt base in this one. But the green component is quite nice and soft. It's not too punchy and in your face, and it's got a lovely kind of soft, juicy, fruity character to it, this beer as well. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business, that's for sure. So let's have a little look at the aroma a little bit more in depth and describe it for you a wee bit more. But yeah, that is a lovely smelling beer, I have to say. So thumbs up straight away to Beer Hut Brewing for this. This is nice. So the backbone of this beer for sure, as I said, you get a little bit of a kind of nice white bready bread crust out of it. Absolutely. Then on top of that, you can smell just straight up fresh, like hedgehog type white bread. It's got that really fluffy, fresh white bready note to it. It almost smells a little bit as if you've got the flour on the bread crust, that kind of vibe. It really smells very, very fresh on the malty side of things. I do find, right enough, if I was smelling this blind, I might wonder if there was a little bit of wheat in this one, because you do get a little bit of that slightly wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose out of this beer. It's certainly got a little bit of a kind of zing, if we can say that, to the malty side of the beer. Other than that, there's maybe a little tiny touch of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, but to be honest, I think the malt base is really quite straight shooting in this. I think it's a bit of bread crust, a lot of white bread, just a little bit of that kind of zingy sort of thing, a little bit of a bite at the very back of the nose, and then there's a very slight kind of McVitie's digestive note to it, and maybe just a tiny wee hint of like a Werther's Original type sweetness to it. That's quite interesting actually. I wonder if they've maybe gone, maybe it could be a smash beer, you never even know. It could be a single malt and single hop IPA. That it could well be actually. It might just even be some sort of kind of pale malt or something like that in it. So yeah, that would make sense when it's such a kind of bright yellow colour actually, but we'll just need to see. Maybe we can tell a bit more from the aroma, but malty wise, yeah, bread crust bread, a little touch of biscuity sweetness, and maybe a teeny little hint of a kind of Werther's Original sort of thing. But other than that, yeah, pretty much straight up on the malty side of things. So on the hoppy part of the beer, now I would say there is a tiny little bit of earthiness to this one in the green component, but yeah, not a lot, to be honest with you. Very nice little small bit of earthiness there, but the floral qualities on the beer are actually quite, the floral side of this beer is actually quite kind of pungent in a sense. So on the on that nice kind of floral side, I would say it's actually quite bright and almost zesty in a sense. I don't know, I wouldn't really describe it as spicy, but it has got a big, the floral aromaticity in this beer does have a wee bit of dankness to it underneath, but I find it actually very bright and very floral in a sense, and that's not what I would expect from this. I would have expected Strata, from what the creators say about it, to have a little bit more of a kind of deep sort of pine needly dankness to it or something like that. But yeah, this one, it's actually quite a bright, pungent floral aromaticity that you get out of this beer, which I think is very, very interesting. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. But on the grassy side of things, for me again, it's got quite a bright, zesty, grassy character to it, and I do appreciate how that comes out in this one. I think that's a very interesting side of this beer actually. So for me, the green component actually has a good level of pungency in this one. So I'm guessing that they will have used a fair little bit of early edition hop in this, as well as doing late edition and dry hopping with it. Remember, the early edition hops are the ones that give you a lot of your bitterness. This is more common in West Coast IPAs. Then the late edition hops you'll get both in West Coast and New England. These tend to give you more flavour and aroma, but still a little bit of bitterness. And then the dry hopping is completely flavour and aroma, of course. And your wort boil in a beer like this is going to be like, 70 to 90 minutes, something like that. But yeah, nice grassy, zesty character to this one, I have to say. But yeah, on the fruity side of things with this one, there is a wee bit of a kind of grapefruity pungency to the beer, but that takes a bit of a back seat. I actually do find that this one is quite a little bit more. I do get quite a bit of the kind of strawberry notes out of this one, but at the same time I almost get a little bit of a kind of lemony, sherbety, zesty character out of the beer, just from how powerful the grassy side of it is. So that's kind of interesting as well. So definitely quite a bit of a sort of strawberry note out of this one. And there is a wee bit of that kind of grapefruity note as well, but quite a spicy, just a very bright floral aromaticity and a big zesty grassiness. It also says here, what else? It did say a bit of passion fruit actually, so maybe passion fruit is a better descriptor of what I'm picking up. It does have quite a pungent kind of citrusy zest behind it actually, kind of tropically citrusy zest. So yeah, quite cool to try this. I think this is the very first time I've had Strata on its own, to be honest with you, so this is going to be a really interesting tasting experience. But as I always say, take a little bit of time to ponder over and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we tried this one. So yeah, this one is the Solo Series Strata from Hut Brewing Company in Kilkeel, County Down, in the southeast of Northern Ireland. Let's have a look at this one. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Thank you to Paul once again. Let's go for it. Oh yeah. Now, I'm going to say straight away, this beer, if I was tasting it blind, I would think this is quite a low alcohol kind of session type IPA, because it has quite a wee bit of zip to it actually. I would never, someone told me without me seeing the can or whatever that this was 6%, I wouldn't believe them. I would think this was like, a 4, kind of 4.5% session IPA or something like this. It's one of these really light and just zippy beers actually, which is kind of interesting. It's almost got a wee bit of that kind of it's almost got a little bit of that vibe that you can get from acidulated malt almost. I remember back in the day, Magic Rock Brewing used to use a little bit of acidulated malt in their beers, and you get a little bit of that out of this. You do get just a wee bit of that kind of zing actually. So I've got a feeling that this one maybe isn't a smash beer. I don't think it's a single malt and single hop. I think this is, there's 1 or 2 types of malt in this, but yeah, single hop obviously. But this is quite a nice, just quite light and refreshing, easy drinking IPA. I think that's fair to say. So yeah, I'd be curious to try some of the other ones in the series. I think I saw that there was a Mosaic one or an Azaka, one of the more orangey hops anyway. I'd be curious to try another one in the series and see if they tinker with a malt base, depending on what hop it is they've got. But yeah, this is the malt base. The first impression of this one is that it comes across very much like one of these low ABV session IPAs actually. So that goes together pretty nicely. Yeah. So it is again quite a zesty, just a zesty, zippy IPA. I think that's a fair kind of rough description of what's going on here. But let's break it down and describe it for you a bit more succinctly, as we always do. So yeah, straight away across the middle third and the back third of your palate, then you can feel a little bit of a kind of more of a grainy bread crusty note. And I would say that the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, the more kind of dry and kind of grainy that becomes. But on top of that, if we focus on the middle third of your palate for the moment, on top of that you do get a nice kind of slightly lighter, crisp layer of white bread for sure. So I do like how that goes together actually. It is, it is pretty nice from that perspective. So I think it does lean a little bit more towards the white bready side of things the more that you drink of it. But if I focus just on the malt base of this beer, I do wonder if there is a little touch of acidulated malt in this, or whether the kind of zippiness that the beer has is something that comes from the yeast. I've had a couple of beers like this, in fact. So it is an interesting thing to think about. And this is one of the things that makes me think about taking one of these sommelier courses. I mean, I've got a background in chemistry. I did a master's degree in chemistry, of course, and doing the sommelier things and learning about the individual chemicals that give you individual flavours, that I think would be really interesting. But on the other hand, I do wonder if that would take away a little bit from the kind of originality of some of my reviews. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, the malty base of this beer, as I say, bread crust, a little bit of a kind of white bready character on top of it, kind of crisp, but it does get a bit more grainy the further you go into the aftertaste. Now, in the middle of your palate, you can feel down the kind of middle line. If you follow the kind of middle line, the middle trench of your tongue, it does get a little bit more like a kind of wet white bread in a sense. So there's almost like a little circle in the very middle of that middle third of your palate where you can feel there's a wee touch of, you get a little touch of kind of like Werther's Original in there. It does have a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original kind of butter candy, butterscotchy sweetness, and as you move further out from that, it does have a little touch of McVitie's Digestive, but I would say that those flavours are quite minimal, to be honest with you. Those are not particularly dominating, if you like, or prominent in the overall flavour of this beer. It does lean a little bit more towards the bready side of things. What I would say though is that when you go toward the back of that middle third of your palate, you do get this just little slightly citricy type thing, just kind of sitting in front of that border region with the back third of your palate, and it does make me wonder if there's a little touch of acidulated malt in this one, because it reminds me of some of the IPAs that I had back in the day from Magic Rock, the Cannonball series in particular. They always like to use a little bit of acidulated malt in their beers. So I do wonder if there's a little touch of that in here. And it's an interesting thing to describe because it changes the mouthfeel a little bit. So it's almost as if at the back of that middle third of your palate, it's like a little bit waxy on the tongue, but then you feel this like sharper, citricy kind of note sitting on top of it. It's a really interesting thing. I've said that it's been a while since I've had to say that in a review actually, but I do wonder if there's a wee bit of acidulated malt or something in here. I don't know if there's anything else that could give you a similar effect, if you like. So let me know about that in the comment section below if you'd have any comments there. But yeah, toward the back of that middle third of your palate, there's definitely a wee bit of a slightly acidulated kind of malty type thing in there as well. So yeah, interesting point to make about this beer for sure. But let's focus on the back third of your palate then. I think we've said everything we need to about the middle third of the palate just now. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of bready build up there, nice wee bit of bread crust, and then the base of that back third of your palate, again you've got that kind of bread crusty note there. You can feel the white bread sitting on top of that, and it's a little bit thicker but also a little bit wetter in terms of its flavour, and it gets grainier and grainier to the further back towards the back of the palate that you go. But sitting on top of that, you can get some of the yeasty notes there, and the yeasty character in this beer is quite interesting because it is like a little bit more of a kind of dense bread, but there's a few kind of crackery and sort of like spicy notes that come out of it as well actually. So that's kind of interesting for me as well. Yeah, malty side of this beer's given me a lot to think about actually. So yeah, for sure, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, but when you start on that back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller, and then as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit, then the flavours are just a wee bit more squashed together in a sense. And again, I enjoy it. I quite like how that goes together. But let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer now. It is a single hop IPA, so we should do that. Green component then. In the back corners of the palate, there is a wee bit of an earthiness there, but I would add that it's quite a smooth earthiness actually, but as you push further forward, it's a little bit herbal. Then as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more sort of floral and aromatic in a sense. You get a nice big sort of floral aromaticity there, but it's not quite as big and pungent as I thought it was going to be from the aroma actually. So that's quite interesting. But you do get a wee bit of dankness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go, but it's certainly not as big as I thought it was going to be. Round the front curve of the palate though, you get a little bit of that lighter grassy sort of thing out of the beer, and it does have a fair wee chunk of zestiness to it, this one. So the grassy character that you get out of this beer is quite sharp and zesty for sure. And that overall, I would say the green component does have a big kind of zesty, zippy sort of vibe to it. So yeah, it's not what I expected, to be honest with you. I'd be keen to try some of their other kind of regular IPAs and see if this kind of zippiness that they have is exclusive to the Solo series, or do their New England IPAs, for example, come across as more oaty, wheaty, bitey, whatever, and do their West Coast IPAs, the more malty kind of ones, what are those like? So yeah, I think I really want to. The beers that I've had from Beer Hut so far have been a little bit more, in a sense, unconventional, I guess. So I'd be curious to explore a few different things from these guys going forward. But yeah, I like that. But that's the green component covered. It really, the most pungent part is the kind of zestiness from the grassy character. Let's focus on the fruity part of the beer then. So, on the front third of your palate then, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up there. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a kind of smooth white bready character, and on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So for me, at the back of that front third of your palate, it's actually quite a sharp citrusy note that you get. It's that kind of citricy vibe again. But the further that you go into the aftertaste, you can feel at the very back of the palate, it's got a wee touch of that grapefruity note. But as you come further forward, it mellows out a little bit to be a more kind of soft and slightly dry passion fruit. And then as you move into the kind of front half of that front third of your palate, there's almost like a wee touch of another dried fruity note underneath. And I hesitate to say it's like a slightly peary, apricot-y type thing, more of a kind of dry pear, I would say. So you do get that, but as you move towards the kind of very front edge of your palate, you do get a bit more of that kind of oily strawberry sort of thing, and there is that kind of oily strawberry type flavour kind of just lingering there into the aftertaste. I really see the strawberry character out of Strata in this one, but you can tell that this hop is just really kind of unusual actually. That strawberry flavour isn't something that you come across all that often in all of these different hops actually there's going around these days. So the strawberry flavour, I think, for me is quite interesting, and it does get a little bit drier the further you go into the aftertaste, but the strawberry notes for me are quite oily. There's a wee bit of a like dry peary apricot-y kind of thing underneath, but then yeah, you've got that pungent grapefruit and that kind of brighter passion fruit in there as well. But overall, this is a really interesting beer for me. I've enjoyed this one. It's like a slightly more alcoholic session IPA. It really has that zippy, zesty kind of session IPA vibe to it for sure. So yeah, kudos to Beer Hut for doing something a wee bit different with this, but I would want to try one or two more in this solo series and just see exactly what they're like actually. But yeah, let's round off with the mouthfeel then. So for me, this beer is kind of, it's this kind of citricy kind of thing that it has makes it a wee bit more toward the bottom end of mid-bodied. The carbonation, I think, does give you a little bit of crispness actually, which is kind of interesting. And overall, the beer has a wee bit of oiliness to it. And I think when you get that sort of acidulated malt kind of thing, it really just makes the beer a wee bit more kind of slick and oily for sure. So that's coming out of this beer. But on the hoppy bitterness side of things, I think this is maybe about 30 IBUs. I think it's a fairly standard 30 IBU beer. It could be a little bit more than that, but I think that zippiness and zestiness that this beer has really, it kind of takes away my ability to judge it in that sense a little bit. So it's quite hard to, I feel that I'm giving you an inaccurate, if I say 30, maybe 40 IBUs out of this, I do just feel that that could be inaccurate, because I think the zestiness, you get the thing that lingers in this beer, that big, slightly acidulated, citricy, zesty kind of thing lingers in the back of the palate with this beer. Then you've also got the green component, the floral aromaticity and the zesty grassiness at the front of the palate. Those really linger into the aftertaste with this one. But the malty base itself does have a bit of dry graininess underneath. It's got a wee bit of bready smoothness to it as well. Tiny little bit of sweetness. But yeah, the fruity side of the beer for me is quite slick and citrusy and sharp as well, which is quite interesting. So I would say that overall, this beer is one, it really is like a kind of slightly higher alcohol session IPA. I think it's difficult to argue that 6% is a session IPA, but the way that the malty side of this beer goes together is like a lot of the kind of more, the lower ABV things that I've had from the likes of Brewski Microbryggeri and Helsingborg and things like that back over in Sweden. But I like this. I would be, as I say though, I would be curious to try a few more from this series and just see if they are tinkering with the malt base depending on what hop. But yeah, two very interesting and quite unconventional beers that we've had from Beer Hut so far. So the next one will be a sour, so that'll be another interesting thing to look at actually. Might well be the first Irish sour beer that I've had, come to think of it. So let's see how we get on with that. But yeah, I think we can leave it there for this one. So this one is the Solo Series Strata, a 6% high alcohol session IPA, if we can call it that, from Beer Hut Brewing Company in Kilkeel, County Down in the southeast of Northern Ireland. There we go. Thank you again to Paul for making this review possible. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Beer Hut Brewing Company, and as I said, we've got another review from these guys coming up very, very shortly. But let me know any other Irish breweries that you'd like me to have a look at, and you will see more Irish reviews, both from the North and the Republic, coming up over the next little while. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Do make sure you check out Beer Hut Brewing Company.